Hey everybody, Nick here, and I'm gonna do a slightly different version of a video that I had originally planned. So this is actually going to be an overview of the different editions of Dungeons and Dragons. Because this has occurred to me, this is a confusing topic that is easily something that people could just get, like, hey man, there's this labyrinth of different editions of D&D, like what do I, of course you want to buy the, if you're going to play, probably the best thing to do is just go buy 5th edition, which is the current edition that you'll find at your game or bookstore, and that's probably the best thing to do if you've not played before. But if you're curious about earlier editions, here you go. I'm going to give you a little roadmap to the early editions of the game, because it's confusing. Let's just be clear about that. It's very confusing. Even people who played for a long time can get this stuff mixed up. I'm pretty well knowledgeable in the various editions and what the differences are between them. So I'm going to talk about that. So if you're curious to know about the different editions of Dungeons and Dragons and what the differences are, or when they were published, or what came out for them, there's probably some stuff in here maybe you haven't seen. I don't have everything here, by the way. I brought out all the physical copies I have of most of the stuff, so I can show you a good portion of it. But there's still going to be stuff I just don't own. So that's just how it is. So let me show you this stuff. So I'm going to start here just by mentioning briefly the 1974 rules, the original 1974 box set. So imagine I'm holding that here. I don't actually have a physical copy of the box set of the. So I'm trying to show you the original copies of the rules. So I don't have a 1974 box set to show you. But that is the first version of the game. It was digest sized, and it was published. It's often called the White Box D&D. Now, interestingly enough, that it originally came in a brown box with a white label on the front of it. So it was literally a white sticker that was stuck to a brown box. So that was the first version of the game, and again, it was smaller than these. It was like digest size, like I said. So it was this small box, and with 3 booklets in it, basically, and some dice, I think. And that's basically what you had. It was later revised into what's called the original collector's edition. I think this is like the 4th printing onwards, maybe the 5th printing, but it's the same contents in the game internally, but the box is different now. So the box is slightly different, and uh, you know it's a white box now, like the entire. So that's where the white box name comes from. So that's the original version of the game. Then at some point, they decided to revise, well, not revise, but they decided to come up with an introductory product for the white box, which is the Holmes Basic Rules, which is this product right here. And as you can see, I'm going to zoom in on the. There we go, sort of. If I can get the shadows off these things. Rules for fantastic medieval role-playing adventure campaigns playable with paper and pencil miniature figures by Gary Gygax and Dave Anderson, edited by Eric Holmes. So that's why this is called the Holmes Basic Set, because Eric Holmes is the guy who edited this version. He was literally just a guy who approached them and said, hey, I think you need an introductory version of the game because it's kind of complicated and isn't super accessible to just the average person, so who might want to play this game, but might have some trouble figuring out on how to play. And so TSR Gary Gygax rightly saw, like, oh, he's absolutely right. We need an introductory product, so they came out with this thing, what became known as the Basic Set, and it came in a box. This is just I don't have the box. This is the book I have, and so this was the main book, and it came with a module and dice. Although for a period of time, TSR didn't actually have dice, so they put cardboard chits that you could punch out, and then you would draw them out of a bag. So like that's crazy, but like that was what they had instead of polyhedral dice. They for a while, because there was a period of time they were really having a tough time getting the dice from the company that had been supplying them. and they couldn't do it. So they had to ship out these versions of the basic set, the Holmes Basic, that didn't have dice in them. And dice weren't super available. Like, they realized this, that like this is polyhedral dice were still kind of hard to come by. So it was only in the next couple of years, as D&D became more and more popular, that suddenly that you could go into a game store and buy polyhedral dice, right? And companies started rising up who just made dice, like that was their thing, Game Science and those kinds of companies. The Holmes Basic comes out, and this comes out in 1977. At the same time, we have this now. Now, this was set up to be an introductory product for the OD&D rules, right? Potentially, but what's interesting is that it also makes reference to the Advanced Dungeons and Dragons set. It says, "Oh, you can go and get the Advanced D&D books." Here's the thing, though. This came out in 1977. The only product for the Advanced D&D line that was available at that time was the Monster Manual. So this was the only product that was available. So this tells you, hey, you can play this for a while, and then you can move on to Advanced D&D. But it wasn't available as a complete product. So they were telling you, basically, you could go play Advanced D&D, but this was basically for thinking about the future when the entire game line would be available. Now, there's some ironies to that, but so anyway, so what happened is that you had this situation where people were often using the Holmes Basic set, then they might track down a white box, play with those rules, and so they'd be playing with the Holmes Basic set, the white box, and then maybe they'd also have a monster manual too, because it's the best version of the monster book, right? It's not just this little digest thing with some notes about the monsters. This has got like pictures of all the monsters. It's much better. The stat blocks are way more detailed. It's fully compatible. This is the reason the monster manual came out first. It's fully compatible with both the Holmes Basic and the white box. Like, if you could use this product with any of the other products. That's why they came out with this first, right? So clearly people in 1977 were using this kind of just bunch of stuff. So they might have the Holmes Basic, they might have a couple of issues of Dragon Magazine, they might have the Monster Manual, and then eventually maybe they tracked on a white box. And then by that point, you had that going on. Then in 1978, they come out with the Player's Handbook, right? That's the second book in the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons line, which is it has all the character classes in it, right? So all the character classes are in here, and all the players' spells and everything else. The monsters are all in here. Now, what's interesting, there's no DM information here about how to run the game. There's a basic kind of overview of the rules and a sample combat, but it's very cursory, right? It doesn't get down into the weeds, so to speak. And there's no attack tables in either this book or this book. So if you played in 1977 or 78, the only place you could find the attack tables is in the white box. The complete version of the attack tables was in the white box. Or you had to track down, there was an issue of Dragon Magazine, I think they issued in 1978, that had the attack tables in it. So a lot of people used that for a long time. They just had this issue of Dragon Magazine because they wanted at least people to be able to play AD&D using the attack tables. But the attack tables didn't show up until 1979 when the Dungeon Master's Guide showed up, this version right here. And once that showed up, once we had these three books in 1979, a lot of people stopped using the white box. Not everybody, though, because there are people who still play the white box today, right? I'm on a message board, the original Dungeons & Dragons board, and a lot of those guys on that board still play the OD&D rules, right? They still like that. There's people who love every edition of the game, and, fair enough, more power to them. It's interesting, and I have an interest and love in the various editions of the game. I mean, I just love Dungeons & Dragons, so I'm happy to talk about whatever version. But and each different versions have different strengths and weaknesses, to be fair. Anyway, so once AD&D comes out, this is now the big game line. That's their main sort of bread and butter. It's the best selling line. And the products are also, I mean, these are expensive books. Man, I remember when I bought this, it was $15, which was at the time crazy expensive. Like, I had to save up my money to buy it. And I didn't have enough money to buy the other books too. So like, I think my friend ended up getting like the Player's Handbook. That's the only reason I have a set here, is because like my friend got this and then he like left it at my house and was like, hey, you can just hang on to this, right? And I didn't. I had a monster manual, so I basically had all three books. But this is my second copy of the monster manual. My other copy is sitting over there on the bookshelf behind me. It is beat to hell because I use that book all the time. But anyway, so that's the AD&D books, and at that point, that's when TSR changes their tactic about the basic set, because they decide they want to make Dungeons and Dragons. Okay, so the white box is still in print, but it's now like this collector's edition thing, and it's clearly like that line is gonna disappear, right, at some point, and it does. So the OD&D rules are going to be out of print, and God, so TSR is basically just trying to get rid of their sort of last copies of that version of the game. And they come out with this version, which is the revised version of the home set. So they revised this into this. This is now the Moldvay set. So it's edited by a guy named Tom Moldvay, who revises the rules. They do new artwork, as you can see here. It's a better product than the home set, I think. But a lot of people also love the home set. Like, there's certain things about that are idiosyncratic about the home set. Like, the home set, I think, is the only version that has initiative is determined by your dexterity. Meaning, like, the actual score of your dexterity, like, determines, like, who goes first. Which, the thing that was weird about that, though, is the monsters don't actually have dexterities. So you would have to generate on the fly what the monster's dexterity score was. So that seems a little weird, right? Like, it seems like they should have included that as a stat if it's something that's important for the rules. But anyway, Moldvay completely changes all that, and they come up with the more traditional kind of just roll a d6 kind of initiative system, a revised version. And the Moldvay rules are really pretty well explained. Like, it's very clear, it's very prescriptive. Like, here, do this, here's what you do, and it works really well. This was then expanded. This is levels 1 to 3, just like the home set was only levels 1 to 3. And this now is levels 4 to 14, I think. This is what's called the expert set. You can see the covers are kind of meant to complement each other here. This cover, by the way, by Errol Otis, is maybe one of my favorite Dungeons and Dragons covers of all time. It's just, it tells you everything you need to know about the game right there. It's awesome. And I really like the expert cover as well. But with these two boxes, you could literally just play the game for years. Like, it really kind of was its own separate game line. And they had promised there would be a third box, which would be the companion box set, but it never came out for this version of the basic set. Because in true to fashion, TSR revised this version just a couple of years later and came out with an even newer version that had even theoretically better production artwork. At least it has a more, I like the Earl Otis cover tremendously. Although, to be fair, this Larry Elmore cover is super iconic, and everybody remembers this cover, right? This is the red box. This came out in '83, and it was everywhere. It was the most widely distributed version of the game. It was like, you could buy this in like Kmart or whatever, right? You could buy this in Toys R Us. It was everywhere. Bookstores. It was widely available. And so that, and it was kind of, and that kind of is the high watermark point of popularity of the game. The red box really was the on-ramp for a ton of people to come into the role-playing hobby. They bought this, they figured out how to play from this, and they went on from there. It came with the module Keep on the Borderlands, I think, and as did this, like it's the same module, I think, included in both. They just slightly revised it, had a different cover, but it's basically the same module. Anyway, but so anyway, this so that's the then they do come out with an expert set for this, which is a blue thing. Just like this is blue, you can see the expert rules here are blue, but this it has a different Larry Elmore cover, and so this is now what's called the basic. This is sometimes called BECMI, and that stands for Basic Expert Companion Masters Immortals, because this is a completely separate line now that's distinct from the two Moldvay sets and the home set, but is now its own product line, right? So you start with the basic, then you go to the expert, the companion rules. They finally came out with the companion rules, so this is like even higher like levels, like up into the 14 through like 25 or something like that. And then there's the master set, which is like up through level 30, and I think this is finally the last set in that, which is I actually have the box set for this. This is the Immortals set. So this, if you want to play like godlings or demigods or whatever, this is the set. Your characters have become so powerful, you've like ascended to godhood, and so you can do that. So it's like above level 30, right? Stuff that you're playing here. So that's a completely distinct game line. Now, interestingly enough, this is sort of the I'm just going to mention this. If you want to get this version of the game, like you can actually buy this version of the game relatively easily, because what happened is they put all of that stuff in one book in the early 90s. So the entire BECMI line was essentially compiled into this one volume version of the game called the Dungeons and Dragons Rules Cyclopedia. It was published, I think, in 92 or 93. I was working at the bookstore, Walden Books, when this came out. I was working there, and I put this thing on the shelf. It also has a Jeff Easley cover. Not Larry Moore, but Jeff Easley. And it's a great looking product. And a lot of people will tell you that for a single volume version of the game, like if you just want to buy one book that has the whole game in it, there is no better product than this thing. This thing, I think, is up. It's like levels 1 to 30. It's got rules for mass combat in it. It's got rules for everything. It's got a ton of monsters, and it is a really, really solid product, and it's really well done too. It looks good. The art's nice. And it's a really solid version. So it's the compilation of the BECMI. The only thing it doesn't have in it is the Immortals rules. They changed the Immortals rules and came out with another box set that was compatible with the Rules Cyclopedia. So the Immortals rules were kind of like apparently somebody didn't like those, and they decided they want to dump them, and so they sort of set those off to the side. But this has all the way up, essentially, the material through the master set. Although I'm not certain everything in those boxes is in here, but pretty much the main stuff you would need is in here. Okay, so that's the Rules Cyclopedia. Now, what's interesting is in the mid '80s. So I have to go slightly back. So now in the mid '80s, they took the AD&D books, these books, and just gave them new covers. Literally, it's the same book, like the exact same contents. The contents are exactly the same. So this book is literally the same book as that. This book is literally the same as that. I do not have the revised version of the Monster Manual. In this version also, I'll show you this. Sorry. We've got Unearthed Arcana here. Sorry, I'm covering up the camera. That's not great. But Unearthed Arcana goes with this set, but it's a new expansion of the AD&D rules. And so that kind of has its own line. This is what's often called the orange spine version of the game, right? Because they have orange spines, right? But it's basically first edition, just with new covers, and they've added some new material. Some people refer to this as 1.5 because it's version 1.5 because it's got the additional there's new classes and spells and stuff in Unearthed Arcana. Like if you ever wondered where the Cavalier and the Acrobat come from the D&D cartoon. Well, they come out of Unearthed Arcana, which was a brand new product around the time they were developing the show. So yeah. Then in 1987, we get this second edition, and this is the second edition of the Advanced Dungeons and Dragons rules, right? So this product and the Rules Cyclopedia would have been available at the same time, basically. This was basically, they were contemporaries of each other. They even make reference to the Rules Cyclopedia about converting stuff between those two. And so this is the Jeff Easley cover, and Jeff Easley does this cover as well, and I think this one as well. So this is the Monster Run. You can see this is slightly different. There's a couple of different printings of the second edition rules. This has a slightly different cover. This is because originally second edition, the Monster Manual, interestingly, did not come. It wasn't a book. It came out in these binders that were folders that had all the monsters in it, and it was meant to be. It was an interesting idea, but I think it ultimately kind of failure as a product. It just wasn't as successful. People wanted a book, but what happened is like it was a folder that like you could then like take monsters in or put them out. Like it was a binder, so you could open it up and put stuff in, and you could buy expansion packs and just incorporate them into your binder. Right, so you could just have whatever monsters you wanted, whatever ones you needed, there in your binder. If you were, hey, this monster isn't in my campaign, you could just take it out of the binder. That was the idea. They wanted it to be sort of customizable, and I think the binders were not like this super highest quality, and some of them like fell apart. But you know. But it was a neat idea. You can still find some of those like online. Like when I was looking to get this version, I also was looking at if people were selling some of the old binders. You can still find them online, but they do go for a fair amount of money, actually, believe it or not. If you have a nice binder that has a bunch of the expansions in it that's still in really good condition, like that's probably worth a little bit of money. Anyway, but so second edition was revised in the late 90s, and I don't have those versions because they did they basically they revised the text slightly, and it's really the same edition, but they added in what's known as the player's option books. So there's a bunch of player's option books for second edition. Second edition became the most expansive and maybe complicated game line, with the possible exception of third edition, because third edition it's kind of crazy. But just the size of the second edition line was huge because it ran from essentially 1987 to I think 2000. So I think it's 13 years. So it is the longest living version of a single version of the game line. Like it lasted longer than any other version of the game. Fifth edition might beat it. We'll see. Fifth edition's still going strong. So and Wizards doesn't seem to have any plans on the horizon for a revision, a new version of the game. They might do slightly updated versions of just fixing errata in the rules and stuff. But like other than that, there's not really going to probably be a new edition. And I suspect when we do see a new edition, it won't be any kind of radical change. It'll be just a nice updating. Because it's if it ain't broke, don't fix it. That's one of the things I think they have learned through hard. As you can see, there's all these different versions, and some people got when first edition went away. Some people were like, "Hey, I'm going to stay with first edition. I'm not moving on to second edition." And then when second edition went away, which finally happened in the year 2000, they moved on to third edition. And then pretty much after that, it's a straight line after that. There's no more. The basic line goes away after. The Rules Cyclopedia. They don't do any more of the basic line as like a separate line from the Advanced D&D line. And Advanced D&D gets revised, interestingly enough, and when in third edition comes out, they just drop the Advanced off the title because they don't have the other regular Dungeons & Dragons line competing with it. It's like they were kind of competing with themselves, they felt like. And so they just drop Advanced off there. So third edition is really the third edition of we're really tracking from first edition AD&D, second edition AD&D, third edition is just called Dungeons & Dragons, fourth edition is called Dungeons & Dragons, and fifth edition is just called Dungeons & Dragons. They dropped the Advanced off there. but it's really the hardback book sets that when we're talking about the different editions, that today when they say fifth edition, that's what we're tracking. Not really talking about the OD&D and the box sets and all these other things. So that's why it's so complicated, folks. Anyway, this is my longest video, but you can see why. All right, okay. I've rattled on enough about this, so hopefully that was illuminating. Anyway, take care.